You're sitting across from someone who's destroying their life and they can't see it. The evidence is everywhere. The empty bottles, the failed relationships, the mounting debt. But when you mention it, they look at you like you're speaking a foreign language. Not because they're stupid, not because they don't care, but because their brain has erected an invisible wall between them and reality, and they genuinely cannot see what's on the other side. That person might be you. Denial is the most sophisticated lie we tell ourselves. It's not just refusing to admit something, it's the brain's ability to edit reality itself, to create a version of the world where uncomfortable truths simply don't exist. And here's what makes it truly dangerous. Denial doesn't feel like denial. It feels like clarity. It feels like everyone else is overreacting, misunderstanding, or trying to control you. The person in denial is always the last to know. Sigmund and Anna Freud first identified denial as a defense mechanism over a century ago, but modern neuroscience has revealed something far more unsettling about how it works. When researchers put people in brain scanners and presented them with threatening information, they discovered that denial isn't just psychological, it's neurological. The brain actually shows reduced activity in regions responsible for emotional processing. At the same time, areas involved in cognitive control light up like Christmas trees. Your brain is literally working overtime to keep certain realities from reaching your conscious awareness. It's not that you're choosing to ignore the truth. Your nervous system is protecting you from it before you even get a chance to choose. This happens on both conscious and unconscious levels. Sometimes you know the truth, but push it away. Other times, the information never makes it to conscious awareness at all. The brain intercepts it, files it away, and presents you with an edited version of reality that feels completely authentic. Think about that for a moment. Your experience of reality is not reality itself. It's a curated highlight reel, and the editor is working for your ego. Denial doesn't emerge from nowhere. It grows from soil fertilized by insecurity, guilt, inadequacy, and shame. When your self-esteem is fragile, admitting error doesn't feel like growth. It feels like annihilation. The ego equates vulnerability with humiliation, so it would rather distort reality than risk the crushing weight of being wrong. George Vaillant, one of the pioneers in studying defense mechanisms, described denial as an immature defense mechanism, something that borders on psychosis. That sounds extreme until you realize what he means. Denial involves a fundamental break with reality. It's not just interpretation or perspective. It's the active rejection of observable facts. People with low self-esteem experience this most acutely. For them, acknowledging a mistake or problem threatens their entire sense of self. So the brain does something remarkable. It rewrites the story. It minimizes the severity. It finds someone else to blame. It creates justifications that feel perfectly logical from the inside. And here's the cruelest part. Denial works. In the short term, it protects you from overwhelming emotional pain. When you lose someone you love, denial gives you time to absorb the shock gradually rather than all at once. When you face a terminal diagnosis, denial can provide a psychological buffer that allows you to function while you gather your resources. But when denial becomes chronic, when it's your primary way of dealing with problems, it transforms from a life raft into an anchor. You can't solve problems you won't acknowledge. You can't heal wounds you pretend don't exist. Denial rarely announces itself. It disguises itself in reasonable-sounding behaviors that feel like anything except denial. Harvard health researchers have identified 4 primary patterns that reveal denial in action. First, there's minimizing. This is when you acknowledge a problem exists but dramatically underestimate its severity. The drinker who admits he drinks a bit too much while his liver is failing. The couple who says they're going through a rough patch when they haven't had a real conversation in 3 years. Minimizing lets you acknowledge reality just enough to feel honest while avoiding the full weight of what's actually happening. Second, there's justifying. This is where you create elaborate explanations for why your destructive behavior is actually reasonable or even necessary. The workaholic who says he's providing for his family while his kids grow up without him. The person in an abusive relationship who explains how their partner is just stressed or doesn't mean it. Justification is denial dressed up in logic. Third, there's blaming. When denial can't minimize or justify, it redirects. If you can make the problem someone else's fault, you don't have to face your own role in creating or maintaining it. The business fails because of the economy, not your decisions. The relationship ends because your partner was impossible, not because you never learned to be vulnerable. Blame is denial playing hot potato with responsibility. Fourth, there's avoiding. This is the simplest and sometimes most effective form of denial. You just don't engage with the problem at all. You don't open the bills. You don't go to the doctor. You don't have the conversation. If you never look directly at the problem, you can pretend it isn't there. Out of sight, out of mind, until reality catches up with you. Recent brain research has revealed something fascinating about denial. It appears to be primarily a left brain phenomenon. The left hemisphere excels at creating coherent narratives, even when those narratives require ignoring contradictory evidence. It's the part of your brain that wants everything to make sense, that craves consistency and logic. When information threatens your existing story, the left brain doesn't revise the story, it rejects the information. It's like a lawyer defending a client at all costs, finding ways to dismiss or discredit any evidence that doesn't support the preferred narrative. The right brain might notice the discrepancies, but the left brain is louder, more verbal, more insistent. This is why denial is so hard to break from the outside. You're not just dealing with stubbornness or dishonesty. You're dealing with sophisticated neural machinery that has literally altered someone's perception of reality. Their brain has created a version of the world that feels completely true to them, and no amount of external evidence automatically breaks through that barrier. Children use denial naturally as part of normal development. A 4-year-old can look you in the eye and deny eating the cookies while chocolate covers their face. This is developmentally appropriate. They're still learning to navigate the gap between reality and desire. But when adults operate primarily through denial, it becomes maladaptive. It stops being a temporary shield and becomes a permanent prison. In dangerous situations, untreated illness, addiction, abusive relationships, denial doesn't just delay solutions, it kills. When you can't acknowledge a health problem, you don't seek treatment until it's too late. When you deny an addiction, it progresses unchecked until it destroys your life and the lives of everyone around you. When you can't see that a relationship is toxic, you stay in patterns that erode your humanity year by year. The medical consequences alone are staggering. People in denial of health problems wait until minor issues become major crises. They ignore symptoms that could have been treated easily if caught early. They skip appointments, don't take prescribed medications, and convince themselves they're fine until they're objectively, measurably not fine. But the relational cost might be even higher. Denial makes authentic connection impossible. When you can't acknowledge your own flaws, limitations, and mistakes, you can't be truly known by another person. You present a curated version of yourself, and your relationships remain superficial no matter how much time you spend together. The people around you see what you can't. They watch you self-destruct while you explain it all away. And eventually, many of them leave, not because they stopped caring, but because loving someone in deep denial is like trying to save someone who insists they're not drowning. The cruel irony of denial is that you can't recognize it while you're in it. That's the whole point. The mechanism works by keeping itself invisible. So how do you break free from something you can't see? The first crack usually comes from the outside. Someone you trust tells you something you don't want to hear. A consequence becomes impossible to ignore. Reality intrudes in a way that can't be minimized, justified, blamed away, or avoided. It's often painful. The truth usually is when you've been running from it. But here's what makes change possible. Denial takes enormous energy to maintain. You have to constantly monitor reality, edit out threatening information, create and maintain alternative narratives. When the walls finally crack, there's often a strange sense of relief underneath the pain. Part of you has been exhausted from the effort of not seeing. The path out of denial requires something uncomfortable. You have to get curious about the possibility that you might be wrong. Not certain you're wrong, just willing to consider it. Willing to ask, what if the people who love me are seeing something I can't? What if my justifications are actually rationalizations? What if I'm the common denominator in all these problems? That curiosity creates a small opening, and sometimes that's enough. You can't force someone out of denial. You can only create conditions where they might choose to see differently. Sometimes that means letting them face consequences you previously buffered them from. Sometimes it means speaking hard truths with love and then stepping back. Sometimes it means protecting yourself while they figure it out. And if you're wondering whether you might be in denial about something, the fact that you're asking the question is significant. People in deep denial don't wonder if they're in denial. They're certain everyone else has it wrong. On the other side of denial isn't just painful truth. There's also freedom. The freedom to address problems you can finally see. The freedom to change patterns you can finally acknowledge. The freedom to be fully known by the people you love, flaws and all. Denial protects you from temporary pain, but locks you in permanent limitation. Reality, for all its difficulty, offers something denial never can: the possibility of actual change. The question isn't whether you have blind spots. Everyone does. The question is whether you're willing to let someone you trust help you see them. Whether you're willing to consider that the story you've been telling yourself might be missing a few crucial chapters. Your brain will resist this. That's its job. But you are not your brain's automatic responses. You're the awareness that can notice them, question them, and sometimes choose differently. The person in denial is always the last to know, unless they decide to start looking.